The story begins in an ancient, dimly lit library, where a narrator speaks with an air of urgency. They reveal the existence of suppressed teachings, long hidden from the world. These teachings, contained in the Gospel of Mary, were condemned by early religious leaders as dangerous heresy. The narrator paints a vivid picture of a pivotal moment in history when ideas that could liberate the human spirit were buried to maintain control. The room grows darker, as if reflecting the weight of these lost truths. Yet, a faint glow of hope emerges as they promise to uncover these teachings for a modern audience. The narrative shifts to a small, secret gathering of Jesus' disciples after his crucifixion. They are lost in a sea of grief and confusion, their faith shaken to the core. The room is dim, filled with hushed voices and downcast faces. Peter speaks loudly, pacing back and forth, his tone tinged with frustration. "What are we to do now?" he demands. His voice carries doubt and desperation. Among the group, Mary Magdalene stands quietly, her gaze steady and thoughtful. Slowly, she steps forward, her presence commanding attention. "There is a way forward," she says calmly, her words filled with an authority that silences the room. Enjoying the story? Like, subscribe, and share to support us. Let's continue. Mary begins to speak, her voice steady but resolute. She reveals that Jesus appeared to her after his resurrection, entrusting her with teachings meant to guide the soul beyond the material world. Her words, rich with imagery, describe a path inward, a journey that transcends earthly suffering. As she speaks, Peter interrupts sharply, his tone accusatory. "Why would he speak to you privately and not to us?" he asks. The tension in the room is palpable as other disciples glance at one another, unsure of how to respond. Mary meets Peter's gaze, unflinching. "Because he knew I would not waver," she replies, her voice unwavering. Mary describes the moment of her vision. She was alone, wrapped in grief, when Jesus appeared to her. His presence was radiant, his voice soothing yet powerful. He spoke not of rituals or doctrines, but of the soul's journey to liberation. "The material world is but a shadow," he told her. "True freedom lies beyond." Mary recounts how he explained that the soul must navigate through obstacles, the 7 powers that bind it to the earthly realm. Her words paint a vivid picture of Jesus as a guide, pointing the way to spiritual freedom. The disciples listen, captivated by her account, though Peter's skepticism remains visible. The room grows quiet as Mary introduces the 7 powers that Jesus revealed to her. These powers, darkness, desire, ignorance, jealousy, wrath, sloth, and arrogance, are forces designed to ensnare the soul, keeping it chained to the illusions of the material world. Mary's words resonate deeply as she describes each power not as an external enemy, but as an internal challenge. She emphasizes that liberation requires self-awareness and the courage to confront these forces within oneself. The disciples lean in, their curiosity piqued despite lingering doubts. Mary begins with darkness, the first power, which she describes as the root of all ignorance. "It is the blindness that keeps us from seeing the truth," she says. She recounts Jesus' words, which liken darkness to a veil obscuring the soul's vision. To overcome it, one must cultivate inner light, a light born of knowledge and self-awareness. The disciples exchange glances, their expressions reflecting both intrigue and unease. Mary's teachings challenge their understanding of salvation, urging them to look inward rather than outward. Mary moves on to desire, the second power. She speaks of how it binds the soul to the material world through cravings and attachments. Desire, she explains, is not inherently evil, but dangerous when unchecked. It blinds us with illusions of fulfillment, she says. True peace comes not from possession, but from letting go. Her words evoke images of chains made of gold, beautiful but confining. The disciples nod slowly, as if recognizing this truth in their own lives. Even Peter seems to pause, his skepticism momentarily tempered by reflection. Ignorance, the third power, is more than a lack of knowledge. Mary describes it as a willful refusal to see the truth, a stubborn clinging to illusions that prevent growth. She recounts how Jesus taught her that ignorance thrives in comfort zones, where questioning is avoided. To overcome ignorance, she says, we must have the courage to face truths that unsettle us. Her words strike a chord with the disciples, who begin to realize how often they have avoided deeper truths out of fear. Jealousy, the fourth power, is a force that divides. Mary explains how it keeps the soul focused on others rather than its own growth. Envy poisons the heart, she says. It distracts us from our unique path. She describes how Jesus taught her to find contentment in her journey, to see others' success not as competition but as inspiration. The disciples sit quietly, reflecting on their own experiences with jealousy and how it has hindered their unity. Wrath, the fifth power, burns brightly but destructively. Mary recounts how Jesus spoke of anger as a double-edged sword that wounds both the wielder and the world. Forgiveness, she says, is not for the other, but for oneself. Her words are met with silence as the disciples wrestle with the idea of releasing anger they have long held. Peter, visibly tense, crosses his arms, but he does not interrupt. Mary speaks of sloth, the sixth power, as a force of inertia that keeps the soul stagnant. It is the temptation to do nothing, to avoid the work of growth, she says. Her words feel like a mirror to the disciples, who realize how often they have succumbed to spiritual laziness. She recounts how Jesus encouraged her to take even the smallest steps forward, reminding her that growth is a process, not a leap. Arrogance, the final power, is the belief that one has already arrived. It blinds us to our flaws, Mary says, and halts our progress. She recalls how Jesus taught her the importance of humility, of recognizing that the journey is infinite. The disciples are moved by her words, their initial skepticism fading into a deeper understanding. Even Peter's defiance seems to waver as he listens. The room is silent as Mary finishes describing the seven powers. Her voice softens as she recounts the moment Jesus explained how these forces are not just barriers, but also mirrors. Each power reveals something about ourselves, she says. To overcome them, we must first understand them. The disciples are visibly moved, their expressions shifting from doubt to contemplation. Mary continues, Jesus said the journey is not outward, but inward. The real battle is within. Her words resonate deeply, offering a glimpse into a path that is challenging yet profoundly liberating. Peter finally speaks again, but his tone has softened. If what you say is true, why did Jesus not tell us all these things? He asks. Mary pauses before answering. He did, she says gently, but you were not ready to hear it. His words often carried meanings beyond the surface. He knew I would persist in seeking the deeper truths. Peter looks away, his doubt mingled with reluctant respect. The other disciples nod, realizing how often they clung to surface-level interpretations of Jesus' teachings. Mary's courage in embracing the unknown inspires them to reconsider their understanding of faith. Mary begins to recount the core of Jesus' hidden teachings, focusing on the divine spark within every soul. He said the spark is a fragment of the true God, hidden beneath layers of material distractions, she explains. The world we see is a veil, created to trap us in illusions. To find salvation, we must awaken this spark and remember our true origin. Her voice grows passionate as she describes how this divine light connects all beings, transcending earthly divisions. The disciples listen intently, feeling the weight of her words. The narrative shifts to a vivid recounting of Jesus' teachings about the demiurge, the creator of the material world. Mary describes this entity as a lesser, flawed being who crafted the world to trap souls. The demiurge rules through ignorance and fear, she says, but it cannot extinguish the divine spark within us. Her words challenge the disciples' understanding of the world, presenting a reality far more complex than they had imagined. The implications are staggering as they begin to grasp the idea of a higher truth beyond their earthly existence. Mary shares a vision Jesus gave her of the soul's journey after death. The soul doesn't drift into the afterlife, she says. It must confront and overcome the seven powers one by one. She describes this process in vivid detail. the soul ascending through layers of existence, each guarded by one of the powers. Each confrontation reveals the soul's strength and understanding, she says. The disciples are awestruck, imagining the struggles and triumphs of such a journey. Peter, though quieter now, listens with a thoughtful expression. As Mary continues, she emphasizes that the battle against the powers is not fought with weapons, but through understanding. The soul's greatest weapon is self-awareness, she explains. When we confront our fears and illusions, they lose their power over us. Her words carry a profound sense of empowerment, urging the disciples to look inward for strength. The room feels charged with energy as the disciples begin to see their struggles in a new light, not as curses, but as opportunities for growth. Peter raises another question, his tone cautious but curious. If the journey is inward, what of the world around us? Does it not matter? Mary smiles gently. The world matters only as a reflection of our inner state, she replies. It is not our enemy, but a mirror. When we free ourselves from illusions, we can see the world for what it truly is, a fleeting stage for the soul's growth. Her response sparks a lively discussion, with the disciples grappling with the balance between spiritual transcendence and earthly existence. Mary recounts the moment Jesus revealed to her the importance of forgiveness, not just of others, but of oneself. He said forgiveness unchains the soul, she explains. Anger and guilt keep us bound to the past, while forgiveness frees us to move forward. The disciples listen in silence, some visibly moved as they reflect on their own burdens. Peter's expression softens further, as if her words touch a hidden wound within him. The narrative turns to humility, a lesson Jesus emphasized repeatedly to Mary. He said arrogance blinds us to the infinite nature of the journey, Mary says. When we think we have arrived, we stop growing. She describes how true humility is not self-deprecation, but an openness to learning and evolving. The disciples nod in agreement, feeling the truth of her words. Even Peter seems humbled, his resistance melting into quiet introspection. Mary shares how Jesus taught her about the interconnectedness of all souls. He said that every soul carries a piece of the divine, and in recognizing this, we find unity, she explains. Her words challenge the disciples to see beyond their differences and embrace the sacred bond between all beings. The room feels lighter as the disciples absorb this profound truth, sensing a deeper connection to one another. The discussion shifts to the practical aspects of the spiritual path. Mary explains how mindfulness and meditation can help align the mind with the soul's true purpose. Where the mind is, there is the treasure, she quotes Jesus. Her guidance feels accessible yet transformative, inspiring the disciples to begin their inward journeys. Mary's final teaching focuses on love, not as an emotion, but as a state of being. Love is the recognition of the divine in everything, she says. It dissolves fear and reveals truth. Her words are powerful, resonating deeply with the disciples. Peter, now fully engaged, nods in agreement, his earlier doubts replaced by a newfound sense of understanding. The disciples, now moved by Mary's words, discuss how to share these teachings with others. Some express enthusiasm, while others voice concern about the risks of challenging established beliefs. Mary listens and then speaks firmly. The truth is often resisted because it disrupts comfort. Jesus told me that planting seeds of truth is enough. Even if the soil seems barren now, it will bear fruit in time. Her words inspire both caution and hope. The disciples realize that sharing these teachings is not about immediate acceptance, but about creating a foundation for future awakening. Peter, now less combative, agrees. If this is our path, let us tread it wisely. The narrator reflects on the historical suppression of Mary's teachings. After her time, her insights were labeled heresy by those who sought to consolidate power. Texts like the Gospel of Mary were banned and hidden, considered too dangerous to the church's structure. The narrator explains that Mary's teachings represented a profound threat to authority by emphasizing personal spiritual awakening over institutional control. Yet, her wisdom survived in whispers and fragments. The rediscovery of the Gospel of Mary and other Gnostic texts centuries later was like uncovering a buried treasure, reigniting her message for a new era. The story shifts to modern life, drawing parallels between Mary's teachings and today's challenges. The narrator describes how the seven powers, darkness, desire, ignorance, jealousy, wrath, sloth, and arrogance, are as relevant now as they were then. In a world driven by materialism and external validation, the narrator says, Mary's message is a call to look inward. The teachings resonate deeply as a roadmap to inner freedom, offering a timeless guide to transcend the distractions of the modern world and reconnect with the divine spark within. The narrative returns to Mary's role as a spiritual leader. Mary was not just a follower, the narrator explains. She was a teacher and a guide, entrusted with profound truths. Her willingness to challenge societal and spiritual norms positioned her as a symbol of empowerment. By teaching that the divine resides within, Mary bypassed the need for hierarchical structures, a concept that threatened the authority of her time. Her courage in sharing these truths made her a beacon of spiritual liberation, not just for her era, but for all generations to come. The rediscovery of Mary's teachings in texts like the Gospel of Mary is described as a turning point. These writings are not relics, the narrator explains, but living guides to spiritual awakening. Mary's teachings challenge viewers to rethink spirituality as an inward journey rather than an external practice. Her message of self-discovery, forgiveness, and overcoming the seven powers provides timeless wisdom for those seeking freedom from the illusions of the material world. The narrator emphasizes how her teachings continue to inspire across cultures and centuries. The narrator concludes with a powerful call to action. The kingdom of God is within you. Mary's teachings remind us that salvation is not external. It is the awakening of the divine spark within. They urge viewers to reflect on their lives, confront the forces that bind them, and take the first steps towards self-discovery. The screen shows glowing souls ascending to a luminous horizon, symbolizing spiritual transcendence. The journey is yours to take, the narrator says. Awaken and find the treasure within.